Hello dear chess fans of International Chess School, welcome back to the lectures devoted to the methods of defense. In this lecture I will speak about the defensive sacrifices. In order to be aware of this kind of sacrifices, you should study the material devoted to the positions with material equivalence. Actually, the defensive sacrifices are meant to reduce the amount of attackers and is a peculiar case of exchanging or removing the attackers. At this position, White gradually reduced Black's options. Black's king is trapped by the dark square's bishop and has nowhere to move. The bishop from h8 is terribly restricted by the central pawns, e5, d4, while Black's queenside pieces doesn't participate in defense. Here White could have prepared d4, d5, but he decided to go right away for d5. Bishop e5 was the best move. Sometimes preparation is needed for such a central pawn thrust. But as I told you, the Grandmaster Philip against Viktor Korchnoi, the terrible Viktor Korchnoi with the black pieces, White preferred d5. And usually there's the speed factor in attack. You have to attack as quickly as you have the chance. But bishop b5 was an excellent restricting move, as the knight can't move. So d4, d5 at the next move is unstoppable. After d5, White was absorbed by the concrete variation. He correctly assessed that bishop takes e5 doesn't help Black at all, since he moves with a piece which is already defending the king. D takes e6, f takes e6, and now White has two winning moves, bishop c4, or a more direct one, bishop g6, when after queen e7, bishop f5 check, queen g5, Black is confronted with the intermediate move, in-between move, bishop takes e6, king h8, and White will take the queen and defend his f4 knight at the next move. But Black decided for something else. He took on d5, e takes d5. Now White should have continued to use the consequence of Black's last move, which released the e6 square. He should have pushed e6, because after e6, again the pawn is untouchable because of bishop g6, or knight takes g6, queen e7, e takes f7, queen takes f7, rook f e1. What's important about this variation is that the character of the position remained the same, with White attacking, White creating a local forces superiority on the king side, while black's pieces are far away on the queen side. Instead here, of course, instead of rook fe1, white can also take on g6. Try to verify this variation on your own. But after e takes d5, white was glad that there's no pressure, no more pressure on a8, h1 diagonal. g2 is well covered, and he returned to the previous idea, bishop b5. But sometimes a move which is executed a move later can turn into an inaccuracy. Now black is confronted with a difficult decision. White is threatening knight takes d5 or rook takes d5. The knight from c6 can't move. d4 is not indicated, since black will be exposed on a2 g8 diagonal, where f7 is very weak. But Viktor Korchnoi thought that he must start removing the attackers. He played bishop takes e5. White, of course, took on c6. Bishop takes c6. And now, if queen takes c6, it is obvious that after queen takes e5, white has an extra knight and he's threatening mate on g7. So bishop f4 is needed. And white puts all his money on the next move. Queen f6, threatening mate on g7 and threatening the queen. I suppose that he stopped calculating here. But Korchnoi continued with bishop takes h6. When after bishop takes d7 we reached a totally different position. A good advice: if you are about to lose material, but you have choices, try to lose material so that you end up with an imbalanced position, instead of having the same kind of material as your opponent. The imbalanced position usually favors the defender. Now the pressure is gone. We have a position with two bishops and 2 pawns for the queen, which makes 8 points against 9. So after rook takes d7, the position has changed radically. When white decided to go for this variation, he wrongly assumed that black missed queen f6, and I suppose that he stopped calculating. So good calculating skills are required in defense. On the other hand, on the other side of the board, Korchnoi wanted to lure the opponent on this line, and his reasoning was next: if you cannot defend an attack any other way, exchanging the attackers or liquidating into an endgame, this is the best remedy if you can do it, exchanging or liquidating into an endgame. The third idea used by black here was to exchange the character of the position, since exchanging the character of the position might disorient the attacker, who might persist with the attacking mentality, when it could be better instead to shift one gear down. This delay in attitude adjustment is often beneficial for the defender. Now white will be forced to regroup but he didn't figure it out how, and the trend of the game has changed. Rook fe1, bishop f8. It is important in positions with the material equivalence to avoid simplification. And with his last move, black stopped. Rook e7. h4. Exactly what I told you. White continues to attack. Instead, he should have played rook e3, when after d4, rook takes d4, rook takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop c5, queen d7, bishop takes e3, queen b7, bishop takes f2, king takes f2, rook e8, queen a7, rook e6. Black created a sort of fortress, but white still has a good attacking idea here. He may, if he steps over the e4, he may penetrate this way, but the rook from e6 is extremely strong. Anyway, rook e3 was better. It is very important for white to coordinate his pieces and to give the rooks plenty of opportunities. Instead, he continues to believe that he's better in the position. He played h4, rook a8, h5, a loss of time as h6 is not a real threat. The square is controlled by black's dark square's bishop. d4, h takes, rook d3, bishop a6, and here white blundered. He played rook e1. He simply gave up an exchange for nothing. He supposed that the game should end up in a draw, but after bishop takes, rook c8, white's last chance was to take on d4. For example, rook takes d4, bishop g7, queen takes g7, king takes, rook takes d7. He should have returned the material back and hope for drawing chances in this rook's endgame. But after rook c8, white played queen f3. He thought he can create a blockade. It wasn't the case. After bishop g7, queen e4, rook cd8, f4, rook d5, g4, bishop f6, king g2, king f8, king f3, b5. White slowly realized his advantage as he started rolling his queenside pawns, and after b3, sooner or later black will have 2 free pawns. This next example is extracted from a game played in 1995 in Bucharest between Victor Komlyakov and Nisipanu Dieter, 2 grandmasters. White is almost lost. 1 minute on the clock. There was no time increment at that time, but such extreme situations may sometimes influence the player which has the advantage, which is black in our case. The imminent threat of black is rook g2. Threatening mate at the next move on h2, and of course rook f1 is not recommendable because of rook takes d2, and the queen from f2 will be overloaded. It has to defend f1 and d2 at the same time. In this case, you have to push your calculation one step forward. You have to see what's happened in case of rook g2. The king from h7 will remain lonely, and white figured out a way to surround black's king with his pieces sacrificing the queen. He played knight f5. Now black could have won easily with the bishop g2, king g1, bishop takes f3 check, knight g3. It is very important for the attacker to reduce the opponent's pieces to passivity. Now after rook takes, queen takes is compulsory, since h takes g3 fails to queen h1 mate. Queen takes g3, queen takes g3, h takes, bishop takes d1, and black is completely winning. Instead, black, like he was hypnotized, he couldn't believe that rook g2 can't win. He played rook g2. The only way to defend against the mate on h2 is bishop f4. But this is a very tricky multi-purpose move. Not only that defends h2, but prepares rook d7 to create that local forces superiority around black's king. And in this case, usually decides who manages to check first. Now, black has a lot of, actually two winning moves and one losing move. He didn't pass the psychological shock that white sacrifices the queen. One winning move could have been bishop d3, since the bishop is untouchable. Rook a1 and mate on the back rank will follow in case of rook d3, and after any queen move, rook h2 will decide the game. Another winning move could be rook h2. But again, precise calculation is needed. Bishop takes, rook takes f2, rook d7, king g6, rook g7, king f6, and you'll see why it is important for white's bishop to be passive on h2 than on f4. Since the bishop would be on f4 now, he will play bishop f4, and after king e6 we will have mate with rook e7. And now after rook f7, king takes, rook e7, king f6, the king can return, and the game is over, as black will deliver mate. But instead of these two winning possibilities, black took rook a takes f2, rook d7. Only now black realized that king g6 will end up in a mate. King g6, rook g7, king f6, rook f7, king e6, rook e7 is the mate that I showed you earlier. King f6, bishop e5, king g6, rook g7 mate. Actually, it's a mirror variation with the bishop e5, since bishop g5 is controlled by the rook from g2. But anyway, after rook d7, king g8 would lead to a perpetual check after rook d8 and king h7 and rook back on d7. But Black couldn't believe his eyes. He wanted to break the coordination between White's forces and played rook g7. Rook takes g7, king h8, but there's no mate for Black. Since h2 is well defended by the bishop. Black's king is trapped in the corner, so White played bishop e5. He's threatening a very dangerous discovered check. Now queen f3 was the only way to continue. For example, queen f3, king g1, queen takes e4, rook g5 check. Now queen e5 will lose the queen, because after queen e5, rook takes h5, king g8, knight e7 will follow, and the queen will be lost. Knight g6 is also possible after king f8. But after rook g5, king h7, rook g7, we have again a draw by perpetual check. After bishop e5, Black wanted to deflect the bishop. He played rook h2. He couldn't believe his eyes how White's pieces are attacking and defending at the same time. He believed that he may deflect White's bishop. In fact, White played king g1, improved his king position. Rook h1 check, king f2, rook h2, rook g2, discovered check, and Black resigned. Since after king h7, rook takes h2, Black will lose the queen and the king. So one more time, you see how important is the psychological effect of a queen sacrifice in defense. So when you are about to lose, try to consider a way to imbalance the position, and sacrificing some material is an important weapon. Remember that in difficult position, it is often good to simplify as much as possible. Exchanging material often helps the defender to relieve the pressure, but if this is not possible, try to go for defensive kind of exchanging, defensive sacrifices, and try to reach positions with material equivalence, or sometimes positional equivalence in return for the sacrificed material. Till our next lecture.